What's going on, everyone? In this video, we'll be going over the top 20 setups I see potential in for this upcoming week. We'll be going over SPY and QQQ first, just to give you my overall thoughts on the market, and then we'll go over some stocks that are reporting earnings this upcoming week, and then some other stocks that do have good setups on the macro and whatnot. So with that being said, we'll go over SPY first. And as you can see, we did just break out for new all-time highs on Friday. We broke this range that we have been trading in since April 9th. We did actually test the lower end of that range this previous week, but we did close above the 20 SMA, and then we did push for new all-time highs. So overall, I really just want to see if we get a continuation play to possibly 425 or 430 by the end of the week, or if we actually do come back down to retest this 418 area. If we do retest that, I would like to see if we can get a bounce off that, or if we actually do just blast right through it and regain this range right here. So with that being said, we'll go into QQQ, which has been much weaker than SPY. If we zoom out, we can see that we've had this uptrending support right here, which we've been forming an ascending triangle. So this uptrending support's been since March 5th. We did just recently bounce off of that. So after we gave up this 334 support, we did kind of flush down and we bounced right off of this area. This area is held quite well. We didn't entirely fill this gap right here, so I'd like to see if we actually do regain this area right here of 334 and then regain this 20 SMA right here. And then if that does happen, I'd like to see if we can break 338 and potentially push for new highs. But if we do actually continue downwards, then I'd like to see a strong break of this level right here of around this uptrending support level around here, which is around this 327 to 325 area. If we do break that, I do have a support around 324.36, so I'd like to see if that holds. But if not, we do have some gaps to the downside, so I'd like to see if we could fill those on a move down. Now, with that being said, the first stock that we'll go over is Roblox. They report Monday and after hours, I believe. Yeah, Monday and after hours. We'll go over the 65-minute chart on this one due to the fact that this one hasn't traded for that long. So when we look at this one, if we zoom out real quick, we are, kind of at the lower half of where we've traded. I'd like to get an overall sense of direction here. So we are below our 50 SMA on the 65-minute. So I'd like to see if we can actually get above this 69.44 level and potentially push and regain some of these SMAs, and then, potentially test this 72.42 area. But if we actually do see continued downtrending price action, we do have this little gap right here between around 65 up to 66.50. So I'd like to see if we could break that with strength. Fill that gap, break this level right here with strength of 64.77, and then potentially test this low around 60.50. So that's what I'm looking for downtrending price action. I would like to see the earnings report before I actually look to trade this one. And then, for downtrending price action, a strong break of 64.77, I'd be looking to play puts or short this one, and then potentially to a new low. But if we do get a very strong earnings, I'd like to see a strong break of 69.44 and then potentially push to 72.50, and then we do have a strong resistance around 60 or 77, I should say. So I'd like to see if we could take those levels out if we actually do get a very strong report and good guidance. I believe this would be the first report for this stock. This stock has not traded for that long, so this could be a very good look into what the future holds for Roblox. The next stock that we'll go into is UPST. This is a very strong stock. So I'd like to see if we can get a nice move on this one. It reports earnings Tuesday and after hours. So if we zoom out onto the daily, we can see that we do have this very big gap to the downside. This one hasn't traded for that long either. We do have this support around 91 or so. So I'd like to see if this support holds, and if we get a good earnings, if we can break this 105 area and then break this downtrending resistance and then potentially push 123 to 145 or so. But if we do get some downtrending price action, I'd like to see a strong break of 91, and then I'd potentially look to see if we could get this gap fill right here. So after a very strong move up, we did obviously create this gap between around 62 or so, all the way up to around 83. So if we do get a very strong move to the downside, I'd like to see if we could fill this gap. And just to note, we are below the 20 and 50 SMA. So with that being said, the next one that we'll go through is going to be EA. They report Tuesday and after hours. So if we zoom out, I do want to go over the weekly right here on this one. Once we zoom out a little bit, so the weekly is looking interesting. If we do, potentially push, we do have this level right here of 150.95. I believe that is the all-time high of 150.88. So for EA on the weekly, as you can see right here, I believe this is the all-time high around 150.88. So I'd like to see if we could get a strong break of this 151 level if we do get a good earnings report. So we did close at 142.42 this previous week on Friday. So if we zoom in, just to give you an overall look, these levels are for the most part on the weekly time frame, so they do hold a little bit more weight than just a daily time frame. So I'd like to see if we can actually get a push to around this level right here, which is around 146, and then we do have that high of around 141 or 151 to 152, I believe. So I'd like to see if we could potentially push those levels if we do get a good report. We are above the 20 and 50 SMA, but if we do get a bad report, I'd be looking to see if we can come back down and test this level around 138, and then we do have this level around 133. The next one that we'll go over is going to be Unity. They report earnings Tuesday and after hours as well. So this one overall, I just want to see if we can get a breakdown. This one's looking like it is testing its lows from March 5th. Obviously, the low is around 65.11. So if we do break this level right here, we could potentially flush and actually test these lows around here. So realistically, I want to see if we can actually break out of either 115.67, which is kind of this top end of this range that we've been trading in since February. But if we break down, I'd really like to see if we can actually flush to these levels down here and potentially make new lows. This one's been very weak as of lately, so if we do get a bad earnings report, then we could potentially flush, and I'd like to potentially play puts to the downside if we do get a strong break of this 86 level. But if we actually do get a good earnings report, I'd like to see if we could regain these levels around 100, which is where our 50 and 20 SMAs are, and then we do have this strong resistance around 115, which we've rejected after we've been range trading for a while. So the next one that we'll go over is going to be SONOS. They report earnings Wednesday and after hours. This one's been a strong stock. I'd like to see if we can actually break out to the upside. So if we zoom out, as you can see, we do have this uptrending support line, and we do have some levels around 36, 39, and 42. And then we do have an all-time high level, I believe, around 44.72 or so. So realistically, I want to see if we break this uptrending support line and if we can fill this gap. If we do, the next level I'd be watching for is around 28, but we do have the potential to bounce around 32. So I'd like to see if we could get a strong break of this support around 36, and then a strong break of this uptrending support line, and then potentially fill this area right here, which there is a gap. But if we do actually get some uptrending price action, I'd be looking to see if we could push 39 and then regain these moving averages right here of around 40 to 41. After that, we have a level around 42, and like I said, that high of around 44.72 or so. So those are the levels that I'd be looking for on the upside, but realistically, I want to see if we can get a strong break of these support lines right here, and then potentially fill this gap that we created right here. The next stock that we'll go over is Utes. They report earnings Thursday in pre-market. This has been a very strong stock as of lately. I'd like to see if this earnings report can give us, more uptrending price action. We did have this ascending triangle that we broke out of recently, and we are holding this range of 28 to around 30 or so. So currently we did close around 29. I'd like to see if we could break out of this range. This one did just IPO recently, and it has been quite strong. So I'd like to see if this earnings report does give us a good overall sense of direction on this one. And if we can get more uptrending price action. I just really want to see what the guidance is on this one and the overall sense of direction that this will give us. So I'm not sure if this is the first earnings report. I don't believe that it is. Yeah, it's not the first earnings report, but this one has IPO'd recently, I believe. So I'd like to see if we could break down of 28.37 if we do get some downtrending price action, and then test this 26.75 level. At that point in time, I'd like to see if we do actually get a bounce, but if not, I'd like to see if we come back down to potentially fill this gap right around here that we made on a strong move up. So with that being said, the next one that we'll go over is going to be BABA. BABA has been very weak, as a lot of Chinese stocks have as of lately. I'd really like to see if we get a strong break of this 22 or 225 level. Let me just zoom out to see what, so this 225 support level, I'd like to see if we get a strong break of this and then potentially flush this 215 level. If we break this low right here of around 211, then I'd like to see if we could come back down to around this 200 level. So realistically, like I've said, this one's been very weak as of lately. I'd like to see if this earnings report will be a catalyst for more downtrending price action, or if we actually regain these moving averages and break this downtrending resistance and then regain this 240 level and potentially test 252 or so. The next one that we'll go over is Billy. So Billy does report, let's see here. Billy reports earnings Thursday in pre-market. BABA reports in pre-market Thursday, and so does Utes. So we'll go over Billy real quick. This one just broke its uptrending support. Although this is kind of a micro support, this isn't a macro level support. Just recently broke that. I'd like to see if we can hold this 99 to 100 level. If not, then I'd like to see if we get a strong break of these levels and can potentially test this $90 price point. For uptrending price action, I'd like to see if we could regain these moving averages. We do have this resistance around 111 to 112. If we break that with strength, then we do have this downtrending resistance and also this 123 resistance area. So I'd like to see if we could potentially take out those levels to the upside if we do have good earnings and good guidance and a good reaction. But if we do see a bad earnings and bad reaction, then I'd like to see if we could break this $99 level and potentially test this 90 level right here. The next one that we'll go over is Airbnb. This one is looking weak as of lately. It is a reopening play. However, a lot of those plays haven't been performing all that well. We've been seeing pretty much a rotation into financials, oil and gas, and a lot of those kinds of plays. So I'd like to see if we hold this 151 level, or if we do get a strong break to the downside and potentially test 137 to 138, and then we do have this low of 121.48. So if we do get a bad earnings and bad guidance and overall a bad reaction, I'd like to see if we could flush and test some of these levels to the downside. Now, if we do get a strong break of 152 or so, and then a strong break of 138, I'd like to potentially play puts to the downside. And the first price target I would have in mind is going to be around this 121.50 area. But if we do actually get a strong push to the upside, I'd be watching out for 170, and then obviously our 20 SMA is around there as well. And then we do have the potential to bounce off this 178 or so level, and then our 50 SMA is around there as well. After that, I have levels around 190, 209, and then 219.84, which is our all-time high. So that is what I'm seeing for the upside, but overall I'd like to see if we could potentially get a flush to the downside on this one. Dash reports Thursday in after hours. I'd like to see if we can continue downwards on this one. We did just make new lows on Thursday, so I'd like to see if we actually get some continued downtrending price action. This one's been very weak, and overall I just want to see what earnings will give us on this one. So if we do see continued downtrending price action, I'd like to see if we could get a strong break of this 120 level and then potentially flush for around 110 to 100. But if we do actually get some uptrending price action, this 140 area is a strong area that I'd be watching for, and then after that I'd look to see if we could regain these moving averages. Then I do have some levels around 154, 168 or so, and then a level around 182, 195 or so, and then 215. The next one that we'll go over is going to be Disney. This one's held up quite well. I'd like to see if we can get a good earnings on this one and break this downtrending resistance right here, and then potentially break this 192 area with strength, and then possibly test new all-time highs. The all-time high area is around 203.02 right now. So I'd like to see if we could potentially push these levels if we do get a good earnings report. But if we do actually see some downtrending price action, I'd like to see a strong break of 182, and then potentially see if we could test this 168 to 169 area. We do have a small gap between these two candles right here. I believe it is 171.72 to 172.90, so about $1 gap. So I'd like to see if we could potentially flush and actually fill that gap right there. If we do break this 168.85 level, I do have a level, if we zoom out, all the way at 153.26. That'd be a pretty strong move down, but overall those are the levels I'm looking for downtrending price action. But overall, if we do get a good earnings, I'd like to see a strong break of 192 or so, a strong break of this downtrending resistance, and see if we could potentially push new all-time highs, maybe push at 205 to 210 level. All right, then we do have BLNK. They report Thursday and after hours. And then also with Disney, we did see a very good earnings report from Roku, and they are somewhat in the same industry in terms of their streaming. Obviously, you know, Disney does a lot more than just the streaming, but we could see that their streaming industry does very well. So BLNK is seeing, you know, lower highs, and we do have this downtrending resistance right here. I'd like to see if we could get a strong break of this 32.50 area and potentially test 25. So the low of March was 25. So I'd like to see if we do get a bad earnings, if we can potentially flush and you know, test this 25 area right here. If we do break that 25 area, I'd be looking to see if we could test around 20, and then we do have potential areas around 15. That'd be a pretty strong flush, but overall, I'd like to see what we get from this earnings. If we do get some uptrending price action, I'd like to see a regaining of these 20 and 50 SMAs, and then this 40-50 level, and then after that point, we would be testing this downtrending resistance. So after that, I do have a level around 46 to 47. All right, the next ones that we'll go over, these do not have earnings reports. CPE is an oil and gas industry stock. The oil and gas industry has been performing quite well as of recently. So I'd like to see if this one can break this 42.31 level, which is the high. So I'd like to see if we can push that and break out for new highs. These are 52-week highs. These are not all-time highs. So I'd like to see if we could break this level and potentially push to 45 or 50 or so. As you can see, on Friday, we did have a very strong day. We bounced off of this 20 and 50 SMA, and we pushed all the way to 41. So we did have about a $4.50 push. So I'd like to see if we can get a continuation play and break this high right here. If not, then we do have supports around 38.83 or the 39 area, and then this 36.50 area, and then 33.86. And then we also do have our 20 and 50 SMA around that 36.50 area as well. The next one that we'll go over is DBN. This one is also in the oil and gas industry and is pushing for new highs as well. We did just break out of this downtrending channel. We did see a nice move to the upside. We held this 23.52 area quite well, and currently we are pushing for new highs. So right here, the high was 26.13. Yesterday we made a high, or on Friday I should say, we made a high of around 26.22. I want to see if I can actually look at what the high is there. It's around 26.55 or so. So I'd like to see if we could push and break the high of day that we made on Friday, and then potentially push for new highs. If we zoom out real quick, I'd like to see if there's any levels. We do have this level right here. If we zoom out, We do have a level around 29.50, so if we do break this level right here with strength, I'd like to see if we could push to maybe 29.50, which we do have the potential to have a strong resistance right there. So the next one that we'll go over is going to be X, which is steel. This one's looking very interesting. It has been strong as of lately. So currently we are testing a resistance on the weekly time frame of 27.91 or around 28. So we are testing that level right now. If we do break that with strength, then I'd be looking to see if we could potentially push to 32. But if we zoom in on the daily, this one's looking interesting. We did just push for new 52-week highs. I'd like to see a strong break of this level around 28 or so, and then potentially see if we could push to that other resistance that I was just referring to. So we do have this uptrending support line right here, and we are well above our 20 and 50 SMAs, and we do have the potential for 24.74 to act as a support if we actually do reject this level right here and come back down. The next one that we'll go over is going to be Peloton. They reported last week. So this one had a very strong flush to the downside after breaking this $90 price point. We did test around 80, and then we did have a nice strong push to around 90 again, and then rejected that. So overall, I just want to look to see if we get some more downtrending price action on this one. If we test this 80 support area again, and then if we do break that, then I'd look to see if we can flush to around 72. So if we zoom out a little bit, we do have the potential to use 72.69 or that area as a support. So if we do actually continue downwards and break for new recent lows, then we could potentially flush to this 72 to 73 area. But if we actually do get some uptrending price action, I'd look to see if we could get a strong break of 92 and then potentially push to maybe around this $100 price point. And then after that, we would have our 20 and 50 SMA around those areas as well. The next one that we'll go over is DKNG. They reported on Friday of this previous week. They are looking quite weak as of right now. We are continuing to make lower lows on the micro. I'd like to see if we can actually get a hold of this uptrending support line right here. This has been a strong uptrending support line, so I'd like to see if this area holds. If not, we do have this support line around 44.44. So if we break that, I'd look to see if we could flush around this area, and then after that point, we do have some volume shelves around these areas as well. So we could see that we get a bounce around these areas. But overall, I'd like to see if we get a bounce on this uptrending support line. We do have an area around 49.81 or this $50 price point. So I'd like to see if we could regain this area right here. And then we do have some resistances at 53.38, 56.67, and then one all the way up here of 64.23. And then the last one that we'll go over is EDR. They just IPO'd recently. I like to zoom out real quick and go to the 65-minute time frame. So if we zoom out, you can see that we have a high of 32.58. I'd like to see if we can actually break this 31.61 area with strength and then potentially test this high right here of 32.58 and then potentially push for new all-time highs. As you can see, we do have the potential for an inverse H pattern, although we'd like to see some confirmations first. Overall, I'd just like to see a strong break of this 32.50 area and push for new all-time highs and then potentially push to 35 or so. But if we do actually reject these areas, I'd like to see if we come back down and hold this $30 price point. If not, I do have some levels around 28, 27, and then the all-time low of 23.25. So this is a new IPO. Overall, I'd just like to gauge price action and see, what happens with this one. But if we do break out for new all-time highs, I'd be looking to see if we could push to potentially 35. Overall, that is what I'm watching for this upcoming week. Obviously, you have to create your own game plans and do your own due diligence. When you do that, you're going to have to execute with discipline. But overall, there's a lot of potential in these setups, and I'd like to see how these actually develop. Overall, a lot of potential for this upcoming week, so let's get after it.